It's just surreal. I mean, this is a small town. This doesn't happen here.
A Sunday morning of worship and time with family turned into horror and tragedy. Good evening, I'm Deborah Knapp.
And I'm Phil Anaya. The deadly church shooting in Sutherland Springs has rocked a small community, the state, and the entire nation. Now take a look. This is a live look of the church as we speak. It's going to be a long night for investigators. This investigation doesn't stop and pick up in the morning. It continues throughout the evening. And here's a look at that. It's about 30 miles southeast of San Antonio. Here's what we know about the deadly church shooting. The gunman opened fire on the congregation at First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs around 11:15 this morning. At least 26 people are dead. The shooter has been identified as Devin Kelly of Comal County. Now, this is the timeline of the worst mass shooting in Texas history. It was around 11:30 this morning that KENS 5 started receiving calls about several people shot at that Baptist church in South Texas.
And then once we started getting those calls at 1:20, a sheriff reports a man walked into a Baptist church at Sutherland Springs at 11:15 a.m. and started shooting. Then we heard there were people killed and injured. We have team coverage in Sutherland Springs, Lavernia, here in San Antonio, and in New Braunfels. One of the most chilling accounts came from a man who was changing his oil from across the street from the church and came face to face with a gunman.
Yeah, Eyewitness News reporter Sue Kalberg spoke with that man who fought back tears to tell his story.
Terrifying, especially coming, I saw the guy, he saw me, he shot at me, and it was within, my 2-year-old son, and I know most of the people here. I went to church when I was younger here. I grew up in the house here, and many of the people that died, I know them, they're people that I know as family or friends that have always been there.
And then I'll come back to you, okay? Okay, sure.
That was Kevin Jordan, and he said if not for the quick thinking action of one of his neighbors who heard the gunfire, grabbed a rifle, ran out into the street, barefooted, and returned fire, this situation would have been much worse. Now that's what happened earlier today. As you can see, the situation is awash in light down there. They've set up a tent city to begin the hard, long task of processing this scene. We will, of course, be here throughout the night as that hard work continues here at First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs.
Yeah, thank goodness for that Good Samaritan jumping into action. Our thanks to Sue Kalberg for that report. We now go live to Addie Guajardo, who's somewhere near Lavernia.
That's where a local citizen claims he ran the shooter off the road and where police found the shooter dead. Addie?
So just moments ago, they took a second vehicle from the scene out here on FM 539. Now, this is the second vehicle to be taken from this, and it remains a very active scene out here right now. Several patrol cars still out here on the scene where they found that shooter dead inside of that vehicle. Now, Johnny Langendorf tells me he chased the shooter out here after a neighbor who returned fire at the shooter jumped into his vehicle. He followed the shooter from First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, nearly 15 minutes out here on FM 539 in Lavernia. Now, a neighbor says she saw the shooter's vehicle lose control right before her eyes.
When I looked over, I saw a big cloud of dust where he had went off the road and wrecked. So I proceeded to go towards Seguin. That's when the young man in the cowboy hat stopped me and had informed me that that man had just been involved in a shooting and to please turn around, that the police were on their way.
Why did you decide to follow and pursue the chase?
It was the right thing to do.
Now, Langendorf's girlfriend posted on Facebook that he allegedly saw the shooter get shot dead only feet from where he was located. Now, police have yet to confirm that information. We do not know how that shooter died. We just know that he was found dead in the vehicle. Now, a lot of people that I've spoken to say it is a heartbreaking situation, but just like this neighbor out here says, they're pulling together so that everyone can get through this tragic situation. Live in Laverna, Addie Guajardo, KENS 5 Eyewitness News.
All right, Addie, thank you. Texas Governor Greg Abbott spoke hours after the shooting.
Yeah, he gave an emotional update on the number of people killed in what is now the state's largest mass shooting. Our Henry Ramos was there and joins us live with more on what the governor had to say. Henry.
Well, Phil and Deborah, he says this is a complex puzzle that is going to take a while to piece together. That is really the big message he had tonight, as well as that he wanted to urge all Texans to hug their loved ones tonight because of this tragedy. The governor says he is proud of the way that first responders have handled the situation. He says this number of 26, well, that number could rise, but he also adds that it is way too many. We are at the City of Stockdale Community Center. This is where the governor held his press conference. He says this will be a long-lasting suffering for those in pain.
It's indescribable. A lot of good folks lost their life today. It's unfortunate. Innocent people, a lot of children. Used to be the county seat of Wilson County, but they lost that title a long time ago. But just a very tight-knit community, just like most of Texas. We're here for each other, so just ask everybody to be praying for the folks that lost loved ones and those that are in the hospital today.
We ask for God's comfort, for God's guidance, and for God's healing for all those who are suffering. As governor, I ask for every mom and dad at home tonight that you put your arm around your kid and give your kid a big hug and let them know how much you love them.
Now, the first gentleman that you heard there, that is the former associate pastor of First Baptist Church, Mark Collins. He used to be the former associate pastor there in Sutherland Springs. He is now the pastor at a First Baptist Church in Yorktown. I was able to speak to him just moments after when I arrived on scene, and he was saying how devastating it was. Obviously, he knows a lot of the victims that were there, and of course, we're learning more about that. But something else that the governor did emphasize is that there is a Red Cross to set up a family assistance center, as well as counselors will be made available for anyone that is impacted by this tragedy. The governor wants to make sure that everyone utilizes those services, because they will certainly be utilized here in the next coming days and weeks. For now, reporting live in Stockdale, Henry Ramos, KENS 5 Eyewitness News.
Those counseling services will certainly be critical.
Right.
I mean, you can't even imagine going through something like this. Now, as we learn more details about the attack, many family members are still waiting for answers about their loved ones who were inside that church.
Eyewitness News reporter Andrea Martinez joins us live now from the scene with more. Andrea?
Yeah, you know, the atmosphere is definitely heavy here tonight. So many family members don't know or haven't heard from their loved ones, and they're still waiting to hear news. They don't know if their family member is injured in the hospital or deceased. And the hardest pill to swallow here tonight is that many of their cars, which have been sitting at the parking lot since this morning, are still here tonight.
The most amazing people that you ever will meet was here today.
Amber Holder has memories with nearly every victim of the Sutherland Springs Baptist Church shooting. She's been attending the church since she was 6 years old, and her father is the pastor.
And I kept asking, what about my dad? What about my dad? And nobody could tell me anything.
Amber says Pastor Frank Pomeroy was out of town this weekend, but says her sister, the pastor's younger 14-year-old daughter, Annabelle Pomeroy, was killed.
As far as I know, she's still at the church. They're still identifying people and collecting bodies and sending them off into the directions that they're supposed to go in.
Just like Amber, so many families are still waiting to find out the fate of their loved one. A community center building is a designated spot for families who are missing loved ones. They comforted each other, prayed, and cried together. Governor Greg Abbott spoke to the crowd of families earlier tonight. The governor promised victims' names would be released as soon as possible. In the meantime, authorities say there is still no motive. Yeah, and like I mentioned, Governor Abbott said that those names should be released in a few hours, if not overnight. And of course, we will keep you updated here with the latest. Andrea Martinez, KENS 5, Eyewitness News.
Andrea, well, we have learned 26-year-old Devin Kelly is the shooting suspect in today's horrible tragedy. His motive is still unclear, but we are working to learn more about him.
Reporter Christy Millward visited the suspect's home in New Braunfels. That's where she joins us live now. Christy, I imagine it's quite the scene out there. What is everybody saying?
Well, you can see that law enforcement is still out here blocking the front gate to this property along a rural road in New Braunfels. Now, law enforcement's been here all evening. We're told this is where the suspect, Devin Kelly, lived. We've talked to several neighbors who tell us this is actually his parents' property. They say he lived in a barn apartment behind his parents' home with his wife and a 2-year-old son. Now, they tell us the family has lived here for more than 10 years. You can see this area is rural and each lot is several acres, so most of the neighbors told us they've never met Kelly. But one neighbor tells us they would hear gunfire late at night. They said it's not rare for people to shoot weapons in this rural area, but thought it was odd that it was always at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Now, we were actually the ones to tell several neighbors that their neighbor Kelly was a suspect in the shooting. Each one was shocked.
Shocking. I mean, you never think your neighbor is capable of something like that. It makes you wonder, right?
Wow.
I mean, if that's the case, he did that. Well, that kind of worries you, thinking, I've been living next door to this guy.
Now, several neighbors told us they would see odd items along the street out here. Couches, furniture, bicycles, lawnmowers. They said it still looked new and nice, but looked like they were up for grabs. Now, we have confirmed that Kelly was in the Air Force, but we are also told that he was court-martialed in 2012 and discharged 2 years later. Now, as for Kelly's wife, son, mother, and father, who we are told also lived here, we haven't been able to confirm where they are tonight. We've reached out to law enforcement several times to figure out where they are in this investigation and haven't heard back, so we hope to have more information soon. Live in New Braunfels, Christy Millward, back to you.
Christy, thank you. Well, 3 mass shootings have rocked the U.S. in the past 17 months, and they have been some of the nation's deadliest mass shootings.
That grim statistic was reached today when the shooter opened fire at a small and humble place of worship. This comes just a little over a month after the country's worst massacre in Las Vegas, and less than a year and a half from the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando in 2016.
Joining us now is Rick Smith, President and CEO of Contingency Consulting, a business that trains and equips people to prepare for and survive events like a mass shooting. Rick, we can't even imagine what this was like. What would be one of the first things someone would do if they found themselves in this type of situation?
So run. You got to get away from these events, but first you got to realize it's happening. So we say that you start surviving these events by preparing today, having these conversations. You have to have a plan. And when you get into these venues, even places of worship, you have to pay attention to your surroundings. You have to be situationally aware. You have to realize something's happening before you can effectively respond. So be situationally aware. Also, have 2 exits. You may not be able to exit through the entrance you came in, so have 2 exits to get out. But when something happens, recognize it's happening and run. If you can't run, and you're stuck and you can't get out of that environment, then you have to hide. Lock yourself in a closet, lock yourself in a back room, turn your cell phone onto silent, turn the lights off, barricade the door, do what you can to make a very small footprint. And then if you can't hide, then you have to fight. And this is a difficult conversation. We know that if you're face to face with a man with a gun, an average citizen thinks, well, I can't win that encounter, but you can. You can. You have to see yourself winning that encounter, and you have to fight. You have to fight like your life depends on it, because it does. So prepare, have conversations with your family, run, hide, and fight if you must. And those things right there will give you the best chance